from Australia via New Zealand, originally from Zimbabwe, Getrude Matshe. And how are you today?
I'm great, Dave. How are you? Good to see you again.
It's fantastic to reconnect after probably over a decade. And it's been
True.
an incredible journey. And your life has been an incredible journey. You've written a number of books. You have been writing screenplays and movies and traveled around the world, raised family, now happily nurturing your grandchild. Gertrude, when you think of Black History Month, what comes to mind?
Oh my gosh, what comes to mind for me are all of the shoulders that I stand on, generations of people who came before me, who showed up for me to exist as me in 2023. I'm reminded of my grandparents, especially my grandmother on my mother's side, who I knew really well. I'm reminded of my mother and my father who are now late, and what it must have taken for them to be who they were. Um, when I think of where I am in the world, based on where I was born, the circumstances of my birth, in a small village on the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe and Mozambique, in a grass hut with no electricity, no running water, for my grandmother to educate her daughter, for my father to go to the UK and get his degree, take his young wife, and put me in private school so I would have the best education. So I sit in gratitude to them for their wisdom, for their foresight, and the vision that they had for my future. And now, because I have a little grandson, looking at what I can do for him to leave this planet a better place than I found it. It's now
Now,
the next generation.
when you share from gratitude, which again, if anyone's watching this or listening to this, I'm inviting you to write down some notes because some of the wisdom that Gertrude will share can truly transform. And this idea of starting with gratitude. Gertrude, it's not necessarily every day was great with grandma or every day was great with mom and dad. In fact, there might have been times where there was a little bit of a battle. I imagine you might have been a little rambunctious at times in your journey, and maybe they didn't see the way that the discipline may have played. Share with me about following your passion, yet also having the discipline and also the respect and the way that that intermingles in the growth of your journey, yet also the way that maybe you will be mothering now still and grandmothering.
Yeah, so following my passion, I've always had the belief that anything that I saw in my mind's eye could be true. I'll share a little story. I became an entrepreneur at the age of 6. My father used to let me fold his clothes, roll up his socks, and tidy his wardrobe every weekend. And he would leave money in his jacket pockets. And that's how I made my pocket money. I never got it for free. And one day I found an old pair of shoes at the bottom of the wardrobe and I put them in the bin. My dad walks into the bedroom and he says, "What are you doing with my shoes? Those shoes are magic," he said. And I said, "They're old. I'm throwing them away." He said, "No, no, no." And he picks me up, he puts me on his lap, and he pulls out a photograph of himself standing on the steps of the Colosseum in Rome. And he points to the shoes and he says, "The shoes in this photograph are the same shoes." He turned the shoes over. They were completely soulless and they were stuffed with newspapers. And he pulled out the newspaper and it was dated to 1967, the year that I was born. And he said he could not afford to buy a new pair of shoes when he got a scholarship to go and study in London. He got a scholarship through the Catholic Church. So they flew him to Rome first, and then he went to London. And there he was, standing on the steps of the Colosseum with a pair of shoes that had no soles. And he said, anything you dream of can become reality. If you see it in your mind's eye, you can make it come true. So I grew up with this big visionary way of thinking. I was blessed to have my dad as a father. He didn't see any limitations in terms of where he was born, the circumstances around his upbringing. He was brought up by a single mom who had 8 children. He was the youngest. He had a very, very difficult life, but he defied gravity in the things that he accomplished in his life. On the other side, my mother was the practical person, the person who would make things and do things and sell things. And she was a nurse, so they shared the same scholarship when they went to London. They left me at the age of 9 months with my grandmother and my sister, who was 2 years older than me. And when I look back at my photographs, Dave, I was the poster child for world vision, severely malnourished. My grandmother did the best she could with the resources she had. It took my parents 3 years to make enough money to send for me and my sister. They rescued me before I had rickets and kwashiorkor. And I look at the pictures of me in London, a year, 2 years later, just blossoming. I have those photographs as a reminder to the sacrifice they made to leave a 9-month-old baby behind, because they knew the value of education. And then they threw us in private school our whole lives. My parents were not rich, but they realized that if they educated their girls, we would get out of poverty. So out of their 5 children, my sister became a laboratory scientist. I went into IT, became a systems analyst, project manager in computers. One of my brothers, who now lives in Edmonton, Canada, is a lawyer. The other brother is a banker. So they did good. They did well. And we each realized that education was the key that would get us out of poverty, and it did.
In what ways do you see, because I agree, so much of our earlier generation was about get a good education, get a good job, create a better life. Has it changed, Getrude? Given with technology, given that people can learn so much online, is there a new mantra that our young ones can adapt that perhaps is a little different than what we were taught to go and maybe take science, and many Asians are influenced to go become a doctor, become an accountant, become a lawyer. In what ways has the mantra, or your mantra, the way that you're going to raise your grandchild in ways and influence, is the entrepreneur journey more of the journey that you would be teaching? I love what you said about mother always made things, did things, served things. And so she had this interaction of providing service. Is there a new mantra besides education first?
I think there is, Dave. We are living in a new era right now. If you have a cell phone, if you have access to the internet, there's a new way of being and a new way of doing. The traditional education model works, but is not entirely necessary. We're seeing young people who are online right now doing some amazing things with the technology. I mean, look, you and I are speaking. I'm on the other side of the world in Australia. You're in Canada. The world is literally flat right now. And I think COVID came to give a blessing to humanity in changing our ways of being, our ways of doing business, our ways of communicating and connecting. I think COVID is the biggest gift that humanity has been given. The Chinese write the word for crisis with 2 symbols. One stands for dangerous, the other stands for opportunity. So we've been gifted with a dangerous opportunity to do things differently, to work smart and not hard, to utilize technology for good. And the next generation of young people who are coming up, if they tap into technology and the use of the internet, they can create magical opportunities for themselves right now.
When you embrace this idea of you being born in Zimbabwe, and I've seen you in the full regalia, the singing, the dancing, the celebration, and you're in a place like Australia where perhaps there's not as much of the vitality of Pachimama and Mama Africa. In what ways do you still nurture your creativity and you nurture your zest for celebration?
I stay connected to the African community, Dave. Africa is where my roots lie. Without my heritage, without my culture, I'm not me. So right now I'm working for part of the refugee service. They have created a food hub for the refugees who have been resettled in Melbourne. And we're finding that a lot of our youth are ending up in the prison system. The kids are getting into a lot of trouble. Australia's prisons are full of brown bodies, and it absolutely breaks my heart. So I've just taken on a new position as a food hub coordinator. We were gifted a piece of land, so we're going to be growing our own food. Food security in that region is a big issue. It was predominantly a farming area that has been bought up by housing developments. So huge fast food takeaways are now in the area. Obesity is a problem. People aren't eating healthy. And I grew up on a small piece of land. My parents were market gardeners. We grew up eating everything from mangoes to mandarins to macadamia nuts to passion fruit. I picked up everything from a tree, and working on the land is one of my passions. So I've got an opportunity to serve in the refugee community, to inspire the youth to use their intuitive gifts. African people are gifted in a multitude of ways. And these children are forgetting that it's in their DNA. They don't even have to think about it. They have parents who have it in their cells. The creation of music, the dance. We dance without being taught how to dance. So that's my passion project for now. And I am hoping that my presence as a source of inspiration for these kids, when they hear my story, when they see where I've come from, what I've done with my life, they can embrace where they are and grab all the opportunities that are available in Australia, because it's very, very similar to New Zealand.
That's wonderful. So again, bringing in some of the African roots and some of the experiences you have, and to actually get down on all fours and plant and to grow and to nurture. These are wonderful lessons to share with people from all races, almost anywhere in the world. It's there's a nurturing that goes on with giving Mother Earth a massage.
And it's also in the creation and the sharing of food. You know, we're going to be having food festivals where people can come and experience African cuisine. My mother used to have an African restaurant, the first African restaurant in Zimbabwe. So I know how to cook, you know, and I'm excited to be able to share that side of things as well. In my language, we have a saying, ukama igasha, inosungwa nechikafu, which means relationships are like fabric. We are bound together and woven together with the sharing of food. It's when you break bread with somebody else and you immerse yourself in their culture that you get to know who they truly are. So I'm hoping that this project becomes a bridge. It becomes a space where people can experience who we are as African people, and we get to know each other in a very unique way through the sharing of food.
The idea of becoming a bridge, I'll shift my background, building bridges. And this is something that you've done so brilliantly, from Zimbabwe to the UK to New Zealand, now to Australia. And I understand Mexico might be in the next month as part of building more bridges. Share a little bit about the way you build bridges with a concept of getting yourself sometimes into a resourceful state. I do hear people complaining and feeling they're so hard done by and looking at blaming. And you've never been that type of person in my surroundings or in the environments that I see you leading. Share a little bit about what you're doing in Mexico and the way that perhaps your service mentality can really perhaps serve somebody who might be a little down and maybe not feeling so great today.
I'm actually serving in New Mexico as a Rotary president for an e-club, an online Rotary club. I joined Rotary 22 years ago, Dave, when I first moved to New Zealand. I had written a book to try and raise extra money to help support the orphan children in my immediate family in Zimbabwe. So I grew up in the 80s during the AIDS pandemic. I watched hundreds of family members die. My grandmother had 11 children. She had 34 grandchildren. 19 of my first cousins died, including my youngest brother, of HIV-related diseases. And I heard about Rotary. I joined them because they were meeting every week. They needed a guest speaker. And I would just go as a speaker and try and sell my book. It turned into a global family for me. They started passing my name to events planners, and it turned into a 21-year speaking career that took me to 56 countries. I can't remember how many towns, villages, cities in between. And being of service wherever you are in the world, I think there's something that happens when you give. When you give of yourself unconditionally and be of service to the people in the region where you're living, it comes back tenfold. My grandmother used to say that this universe is like a giant bank, and you have to keep depositing good deeds. Nothing comes back from the people you serve, but it does come in very unexpected ways. And so my life plays out like a series of little miracles. When I lived in New Mexico, I had gone through my divorce. I packed my suitcase and thought, I'm going to go on an adventure and just do something new. And the first place I looked for were Rotary clubs in New Mexico. And it became another extended family for me. And now I'm heading an online club sitting in Australia. And most of my members are in Phoenix, Arizona, and Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Well, I'm gonna distill and give a little twist on that for people who are listening. So, again, if you're listening to Getrude, this idea of speaking, this idea of writing, this idea of service, that formula is actually quite fascinating because in the research these days, Getrude, it's about beautiful that it contributes to neuroplasticity. It contributes to dopamine and oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. It makes you healthier. It makes you stronger. So what you've done by practicing beautiful things in service and writing and speaking, it does make you healthier. A couple of the organizations, if folks didn't hear, Rotary International. For me, it was also Toastmasters. The little brother of Rotary is Rotaract. And there's opportunities to go outside of your comfort zone. And one of the mantras for me this year is really getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I have a feeling, Getrude, your vastness of being able to step into the unknown is what has led you to have an absolutely incredible life. And I guess as I bring this celebrating Black History Month micro session with you to a completion, what would be one or two tips or themes that you have for this year for yourself and also to uplift any of our friends watching this today?
My theme for this year is make the impossible possible. Think of the craziest thing you would like to manifest or bring into reality. I read a quote that said, if you're not happy with your current reality, be unrealistic. So your mind has no limits in terms of what you can create. You are your own limitation. So challenge yourself to, like you said, step out of your comfort zone, do something you have never done before, and you will manifest it once you put your mind to it. But you have to get clear what the vision looks like, what the end result looks like, what it feels like when you get there. So that's how I create, Dave. I sit in the future of who I am becoming. They say that you will never have a seed planted in you that you cannot bring to fruition. So if you feel that urge to do something, trust yourself. I go into prayer and meditation, and I tune into the essence of who I am becoming. I ask my future self, what is the next step? And sometimes it percolates through my dreams, and these little knowings come up, and I know exactly what my next move should be. Or I share it with people, I talk about what I'm working on, and it's like a chain of little synchronistic events where one person will introduce me to the next person who will take me to the next event. And I look back a year later and I've solved the problem that I was trying to solve.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful advice. I'm really asking people to tap your heart, maybe rewind what Getrude has just shared with you. Tap your heart, maybe tap your third eye, put a smile on your face, and tap into your future self. It's such a beautiful concept. It can be practiced, an invitation to each of you to find your way to express. Look for communities, environments that encourage and support, because you are a miracle. And we're really grateful that you have a moment to share with us. Getrude, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And we'll wish everyone an absolutely miraculous 2023. What are one or two ways people can reach out to you, see your books, and connect with you, please, Getrude?
So my website is theherstorycircle.net. I play very actively on LinkedIn and Facebook. Please inbox me, reach out if you've listened to this interview. I love to extend my network of friends globally. And I always respond. Just mention that you were on this show, and I will reach back to you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Getrude. Wishing everybody an absolutely magical, miraculous 2023. Thanks.